What do you like? Tell me what you like.
I love the idea of nourishing both our body and our soul.
Welcome to the Nourishing You podcast presented by the National Association of Nutrition Professionals, NANP. We invite you to join Kristen Burkett and Diana Walley as they host experts from the holistic wellness space who will share practical tips and information to enhance your health and vitality. Kristen and Diana are master nutrition therapists and board certified in holistic nutrition with private practices that support their clients as they strive to reach their full potential. If you enjoy today's show, please help us out by commenting below, liking this video, and subscribing to the channel to help us spread the word.
You have to move your body. That's my message. That's my passion.
This episode of the Nourishing You podcast is brought to you by Designs for Health.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Nourishing You podcast. Today, we're doing things a little bit differently. Instead of bringing on a guest, Diana and I wanted to have a genuine, candid conversation between the two of us about a topic that's become both fascinating and controversial in the health world, and that's weight loss medications. Specifically, the GLP-1 receptor agonists, such as Ozempic and Wegovy, those are also known as semaglutide, and Mounjaro, which is also tirzepatide. We want to reiterate up front here that we are both holistic nutrition professionals. We are not licensed practitioners, so this is not intended to be medical advice. It's based on our opinions and research.
Yeah, that's right. This is going to be so much fun. So, as you said, we both spent the last couple of years diving deep into the research and clinical implications of these medications. And we want to share what we've learned through the lens of our holistic nutrition training. Our goal is not to take sides, but to shed light on the bigger picture. So, namely, what to consider, how to support clients or yourself if you're using these tools, and how to help individuals seeking a more natural path towards healthy weight management.
Right. I'm sure most of you have seen these medications make the headlines recently for their dramatic results, but there's a lot to unpack with it. So before we get into the details, let's put into perspective what's going on with a few statistics. So what we know is the use of these medications like Ozempic and Wegovy has really exploded in the recent years. Back in 2019, there were only about 0.3% of adults, of those that were overweight or with obesity, using these medications. We're not really focusing on the diabetic population here. We're looking at these for more weight loss implications. But by 2024, that number has jumped to over 2%. And while that might not seem like a very large percentage, that's a six-fold increase in a very short period of time.
And that growth isn't slowing down. So surveys show that about 1 in 20 adults in the US have now tried these medications purely for weight loss, separate from diabetes treatment. The highest use is among adults aged 50 to 64, where nearly 1 in 5 have reported taking a GLP-1 drug. And younger adults are starting to follow suit. But what about older individuals? So only about 1% of people over 65 use them for weight loss. And this is largely because Medicare doesn't cover them yet. This is changing. And at the time of our recording, it looks like Medicare and Medicaid are changing or considering changes to this policy.
So while the overall percentage of users is still relatively small, the increase has been dramatic. And really what this means is more people are curious about it. They're considering it, maybe already using these medications. So it's not going away anytime soon.
Yeah.
So let's start with some basics. Diana, can you give us a quick overview of what GLP-1s actually are?
Sure. GLP-1 stands for glucagon-like peptide 1, kind of a mouthful. But this is a hormone our bodies naturally produce in response to eating. And this hormone helps to regulate blood sugar by stimulating insulin release. And it also slows gastric emptying, meaning that food moves more slowly through the digestive tract, keeping you feeling fuller longer. Now, the GLP-1 medications are synthetic synthetic versions of this hormone. So the drugs were originally developed for type 2 diabetes, but patients began losing significant weight on the GLP-1s, and that's what led to their use for weight management in non-diabetic patients. It's important to note that the hormone GLP-1 differs substantially from the pharmaceutical version. Natural GLP-1s stick around in the body for only a few minutes, but the drug version persists for days. So it lasts much longer. And this stability allows the drug to go into the brain where it squelches appetite and cravings directly. And this may be why people on the drugs lose so much weight so quickly.
And that's kind of where this whole wave began. I think it's fascinating that they impact both the gut and brain signaling to reduce that appetite and increase that sense of fullness. That's also called satiety. But to be fair, there's other potential benefits with these medications other than weight loss. Some may be due to the side effects of the improved metabolic health that people get because their blood sugar is better controlled, so other things in the body begin to work better. But it also appears to be some independent factors responsible. For example, we're seeing improvements in cardiovascular health, cancer rates, neurological health, and this may be due to the interaction on different receptors throughout the body.
That's all so fascinating. Okay, so what are some of the most common side effects or cautions that practitioners should know about in regards to these medications?
That's a good question. The biggest immediate issues tend to be gastrointestinal, nausea, diarrhea, constipation. Those types of symptoms seem to affect about half of all users. Not everyone, but about half. Those usually improve with time. However, there is a potential for more serious, longer term complications. Those have been reported as things like pancreatitis, gallbladder disease, acute liver injury, bowel obstruction, gastroparesis, or severe constipation. Something not being talked about much is the increase in a gut imbalance called small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. I started looking into that actually earlier this week. There's a documented higher rate of this condition due to the slowed gastric emptying, and that can also be related to the mentioned GI symptoms above, like the bloating and the gas and all of those types of things. So that's a gut imbalance that can happen. Another really common issue that we're seeing is due to the collagen loss that can come alongside any rapid weight loss. It's been dubbed Ozempic face, so you might have heard that in the news. So you might see hollow cheeks, sagging skin around the eyes, in the jawline, more pronounced wrinkles, maybe somebody looking more gaunt or tired in their appearance. And that's where it becomes really important to think not just about the pounds being lost, but how that weight is being lost in general, and maybe how rapid that weight is being lost to control some of those things, because the skin just doesn't have a chance to catch up.
That's such an important point. And the weight regain issue after stopping these drugs is also real. So I think it's important that we talk about that. Studies show most people regain much of the weight unless they've built habits around exercise and nutrition, which is what we're here for. It's not just about the drug, but it's about the lifestyle synergy. It's important to think of the medication as one tool in the tool belt, not the full solution.
Yeah.
It's really about layering on nutrition and movement so the body can maintain metabolic resilience when the drug is discontinued.
Absolutely, because that's such a big issue is the weight regain and this sense that someone needs to be on that medication for life. And so maybe there's strategies around that. And I think a lot of things we're going to talk about may help with that. So let's transition into body composition, because that's really where the story gets more interesting. Diana, can you explain what happens to the body composition on these medications?
And absolutely, I'm so glad we're going to talk about this because I have had many clients who have, experimented with these medications with their physician, but they're not educated around the body composition issues. When people lose weight quickly, they often lose both fat and lean body mass. And lean body mass includes muscle, bone, organ tissue. Like, we don't want to lose any of that. And studies do show about 1/3 of the weight lost on GLP-1s is that lean mass. And remember, that's muscle, bone, organ tissue. And 2/3 is fat mass. And that loss of muscle and the other things that we talked about, the bone, the organ tissue, is concerning, and especially for muscle because it's metabolically active tissue. And said a different way, it's what drives your resting metabolic rate, or sometimes you might see it RMR. That stands for resting metabolic rate. And that supports blood sugar balance, cardiovascular health, and cognitive function as you age. So, all super important mechanisms of muscle.
So losing too much lean muscle mass can set someone up for something called sarcopenia. That's the medical term for age-related muscle loss. And while that may not seem like a big deal, sarcopenia is linked to increased risk for osteoporosis, Alzheimer's, and frailty. So it's a really important concept to understand if considering one of these medications. Diana, what are the most effective ways to offset this?
2 key things: strength training and sufficient protein intake. So, strength training, working those muscles, and eating enough protein. Ideally, in regards to strength training, we're talking about 2 to 4 full body strength sessions per week. And we'll get into the nitty gritty there in just a minute. Strength training is really a non-negotiable. Kristen and I are 100% aligned on this. So it's a non-negotiable where we'll work with you on some different ways that you can implement that into your lifestyle, but non-negotiable. And that's because it's so important for maintaining healthy body composition, especially, as we talked about, anyone losing weight quickly, whether you're on the medication or just through lifestyle changes. Muscle is what keeps your metabolism humming, and it helps your body to use carbohydrates and fats efficiently. It also helps to stabilize blood sugar and, again, protects against strength declines as that may come with age, and sarcopenia that Kristen was just talking about. But as I just alluded to, it's not about just lifting weights at the gym. What matters most is that you're consistently challenging your muscles. This could mean resistance bands, which are a lot of fun. You can pick up on Amazon. You could do that at home when you travel. Body weight exercises. These are things like squats and push-ups, or free weights, or even machines at the gym. As long as you're working hard enough that the last few repetitions of each set feel difficult, but still doable with good form. And I like to say the key to the exercise game is to stay in the game so there are no injuries allowed. Absolutely not. So you do want to make sure that you're using good form. And again, a good rule of thumb is 2 to 4 full body sessions a week. That means, you're getting all of those major muscle groups. And that would be like the front of the legs, the back of the legs, your glutes, your back, your chest, your shoulders. So the major muscle groups. I don't know about you, Kristen, but I also like to work up my arms, the triceps, the biceps. And while those aren't major muscle groups, and you do hit those, so to speak, when you're doing other parts of your body, your major muscle groups, I wouldn't go to those first. You want to hit your legs, the front of your legs, the back of your legs, your glutes, your back, your chest, your bigger muscles. You're going to just get more bang for your buck that way. But, if you're getting stronger over time, lifting a little more weight, doing more repetitions, recovering faster, that's a sign that you're doing enough. The goal is not to overtrain. We talked about no injuries allowed. But you want to progressively build and maintain strength so your metabolism and muscle mass stays healthy long after that weight loss phase ends.
And I always like to recommend to my clients that are starting out new to the strength training world, or if they've been out of it for a long time, or for my clients that are in menopause and may have osteopenia or even diagnosed osteoporosis, working with a trainer to get started with something like that, even if you're going to take over doing it at home, but having somebody work with you on good form is incredibly important, and to start you at the right place so that you're not overdoing it. I think that's incredibly important. The other question I get a lot is, what about aerobic exercise or other types of exercise? Where does that fit in to this equation?
When it comes to activity, exercise, movement, not all of it affects the body the same way. So aerobic exercise, walking, biking, swimming, that sort of thing, is great for heart health, improving circulation and increasing calorie burn during the activity. So while you're working out, and it's also really helpful for supporting insulin sensitivity, mental well-being. We all know how great we feel after exercise. So it definitely has value, has its place. But think of it this way, and Kristen, this is something I know that you have sort of coined. Cardio helps you burn calories, but strength training helps you build and maintain the muscle that helps burn the calories. That makes sense. You can see how important that strength training and building that muscle is. So ideally, you combine both aerobic activity for cardiovascular health, metabolic health, and then strength training that 2 to 4 times a week to protect bone, muscle, and that long-term metabolic rate we talked about. And the second key is adequate protein, which again, we alluded to earlier, aiming for minimally roughly around 0.7 grams per pound of goal body weight. And that number can go up or down depending on your age, your activity, whether you're plant-based or not. And again, that's 0.7 grams per pound of your goal body weight. And that would mean taking your goal body weight, timesing it by 0.7, and then coming out with the grams of protein. And that's a target. I admit I don't meet it every day, but having a target really helps you to be mindful of prioritizing protein. So that's why we really like to focus on that.
Something just came to my mind while you were saying this, and I'm not sure that we're going to hit on it directly enough. And I just want to make sure we don't miss it, because you talked about the strength for long-term metabolic rate. And I want to circle back to why that's so important in this context, because with these weight loss medications, the amount of calories coming in per day is significantly lower than what a normal caloric intake would be, which is part of why the weight loss is so dramatic. But when you reduce those calories by that much, it will change your metabolic rate. And so having that strength and that lean muscle to keep that metabolic rate up gives you a little bit more flexibility there so that you don't have to eat 500 calories a day for the rest of your life. I think that's an important piece. And then the other thing is that plant protein. I just want to expand on that a little bit because, just making sure that our audience is clear as to why it matters. Plant-based protein targets might need to be a little bit higher because they're not absorbed as well and utilized as well by the body as efficiently as animal proteins. They have fewer of the essential amino acids that are needed to build and maintain muscle. Different amino acids are used in different ways in the body, and there's particular amino acids that are not as sufficient in the plant proteins. So it's not that plant-based is not adequate. It can be. You just need to consume a little bit more. So thinking closer to maybe at least 0.8 grams per pound of your goal body weight instead of the 0.7, or maybe even a little bit higher. And then making sure that you're purposely combining legumes, grains, nuts, seeds to cover all those amino acids, and you're not missing anything is important. Don't rely on just one source of a plant protein. With these medications, I think we also want to keep in mind that given everything we just said here, it's not just about the aesthetics of a slimmer body. It's about maintaining that metabolic flexibility. So we could say more muscle, more margin, right? What we just talked about with that flexibility. So if someone starts these medications and wants to transition off of them someday, it's a concept that has to be embraced. You can't ignore it. But really, it's important for anyone on a weight loss journey, as the same issue is true, regardless of how. These medications have just kind of brought to light the rapid rate and the results of this rapid weight loss versus a slower, more consistent, steady weight loss. But the issue is still the same.
Yeah. The more muscle, more margin is such a good way to think about it. And I'll sometimes use the analogy of muscle is like our suitcases. If you think about it that way, where we can store that extra carbohydrate, that blood sugar, kind of going back to your more muscle, more margin. And so if you think about it, the more muscle is almost like, if you think about the suitcase analogy, like you're packing for a trip, the more muscle you have, if you're packing, you can pack all the fun things that you want to bring on your vacation, like the extra this, the extra that, if you're like me. But if you have a really small suitcase, you can barely bring anything along. I kind of think about it that way, or we'll use that analogy. And the other thing I wanted to say about having a protein target, which really helps me. And as I said before, I don't always meet my target. So I do that 0.7 grams per pound of ideal body weight, is that it helps me to prioritize, as I said before. For example, if I'm thinking about a snack in the afternoon and maybe I want to have a cup of tea and I have some banana bread that I made in the fridge or something, I'll say, wait a second. So just sort of loosely in my head, have I met my protein targets? Okay, if not, what could I slide in with that snack to then help me meet my target? Because for me, it is challenging to get that in with 3 meals. So for example, I might grab like a little bit of, like yesterday, I had some leftover tuna salad in the fridge. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to have a little bit of tuna salad with, before I have my banana bread, or a couple pieces of deli turkey or something like that because it keeps it top of mind. We're not saying you have to be perfect with it, but just prioritize it.
I think that's a super important point. So I love the suitcase analogy because I always like the bigger suitcase.
Me too.
Yes, absolutely. I don't ever like to be caught with not having what I want there where I'm traveling. But anyway, with the protein, I know we've talked about this on past podcasts, but I don't know that I've ever worked with the client unless they were coming to me already prioritizing this, which it takes a lot of conscious effort to do. But on a regular basis, I don't know that I've ever worked with anyone that was meeting a really healthy protein target to begin with. And I will say it's probably the most challenging goal that I give somebody because it's just not easy to think of protein first. And it's not where our typical food system is providing the calories and the options from. It's not, you don't just, go order the protein. It's always wrapped in lots of things and with all of the sides that are nothing to do with protein. So I do think it's so important. And even if you're not on this weight loss journey or using these medications, just for that metabolic flexibility as we get older, take some time to figure out where you're at now. What protein are you getting in and how much is that relative to your lean body mass? Are you going to be able to maintain that? Because that's that's what you build up for health longevity wise from here on out. So I feel like it's the most important lever, regardless of the health goal.
Oh, I agree with you 100%. And to your point, it's not, our society isn't built around making that easy. The easier choices are the carbohydrates and the fats, right? Those are just sort of easy packaged. Protein takes some cooking sometimes and some planning. And so I have little tips and tricks like, tuna in my cupboard or canned salmon or deli meats. And I buy, the healthy, organic, lower sodium type of deli meats. And those are out there. Or like turkey burgers in my freezer, or I am like protein lady. But it does take planning and just practice and just kind of even make a note of like, okay, what are the protein foods that I like the most that I could keep handy? Leftovers are great. Sometimes, not calling out anybody in my house, but other people eat them. I'm just saying. If anybody's watching this that I live with, and you were planning on that and you're like, oh, some of that's gone. But again, having little things in, around the house, in the pantry or in the freezer or whatever. And that goes with having pre-washed mixed greens, frozen vegetables, frozen berries. A lot of people, I think, they go for perfection and then because it's so hard to be perfect, have like these perfect, beautiful greens that then they have to take out the salad spinner and wash them. And so they don't eat them, or they let vegetables go bad because it was too hard to prepare them. It doesn't have to be perfect. And we're not asking that. We're just asking you to prioritize, practice, get better every day.
Exactly.
Okay. So let's talk about those people who want to prefer a natural route to weight loss. And again, we're not anti these drugs at all. We're just saying that because of what we do, we hear a lot from people who want to take a more natural route to weight loss, or even if you want to complement the medication. Let's talk about ways that we can boost our body's own GLP-1 production. As we said, it is a natural hormone that our body produces. So, Kristen, what should we be thinking about here?
Love this. So we're going to sound like broken record, but the two biggest dietary triggers are fiber and, again, protein. So fiber is so important because it slows the digestion and stretches the stomach. And so that naturally triggers your GLP-1 release. So even if you're not on a medication, your natural production will increase with higher fiber foods. So certain types of fiber seem to trigger that GLP-1 release more than others. Things like oats, apples, pears, beans, lentils, those seem to be especially effective. And then again, protein. Yes, here we go again. Protein enhances your satiety. And so we said it also helps preserve that muscle mass and also supports calorie burn. So those two things I feel like are your levers for your diet. Get your protein, get your fiber, and then see where you have room to add things around those.
Perfect. Yeah. Don't you think fiber is having like a renaissance moment or like a glow up? I mean, it's everywhere you turn, and it is so important. And this is because I've talked to clients obviously about this topic, and when I bring up fiber, that is really a light bulb goes off. They're like, oh, I haven't thought about it in that way, but it's so true. And we just wanted to highlight the fact that the quality of fiber does matter. Kristen just mentioned some great sources, but it appears that the kind of fiber that's added to processed foods doesn't seem to have the same benefits as the whole food sources that Kristen just mentioned. So, Kristen, how much fiber do you typically recommend for your clients?
Kind of depends on where people are starting, because if you're not used to getting very much fiber in your diet, it can take a little bit of time for your body to kind of say, we got to know where we're starting. But in general, about 25 grams a day, if you're not already a high fiber eater, adjusting slowly. But once you tolerate fiber pretty well, I like to get you up to at least 35 grams a day.
Yeah.
And that can be through all kinds of fruits and vegetables and legumes to get you there. I'd also make sure as you bring in more fiber, you're definitely increasing your hydration, especially if you're adding fiber more quickly. But hydration is really important to get that fiber to work well and not end up having problems gut-wise, like constipation and different things like that. But it really depends on where your gut is. And so some people don't tolerate a lot of fiber if they've got some imbalances. So if you're one of those people that says, well, I really can't add fiber because it causes me problems, then you probably need to work with somebody like a nutrition therapist to figure out why and figure out if there's a way that you can get a little bit more balance or find a way to add those things in a safe way so that you're comfortable, because none of this should make you uncomfortable. And that's the last thing we want to recommend is just eat your fiber and don't feel good, but it can be an issue for people. I'm also glad that you brought up the quality issue, Diana, because it is so important. There are studies that show people that eat a more ultra-processed food diet eat an average of 500 calories a day more than those on a whole foods diet. That's significant. Like for some people on these medications, that's the whole allotment for the day is generally around 500 calories. So following a whole food, real food diet can be helpful for multiple reasons. I mean, it's an instant slash in calories when you take out that ultra processed food. But they also do other things that are not helpful in this whole process. So the ultra processed foods also disrupt the gut. Most people don't realize how important gut health is for proper GLP-1 production. It's our healthy bacteria that produce GLP-1 in the gut. That's what triggers that release that we get when we eat. And so when we're not supporting our healthy gut bacteria by eating more ultra-processed foods, we're not giving ourselves the opportunity to have our own GLP-1 release. And so, yeah, we think, I don't ever feel full and I can't lose weight. Maybe I need these weight loss meds. Well, maybe if we're feeding ourselves a little bit better, we may not actually need them, Not saying that's not always the case, but sometimes that could be part of the issue. Those fibers feed the bacteria. They make something called short chain fatty acids. That's what's really important for triggering that GLP-1 production. So fiber is really important just as a foundation for gut health. And then this whole topic on, how we can make more GLP-1.
Yeah, so good. And I agree with you on the recommendations. So of course, we're in line with that, of course. And I just wanted to say from a practical standpoint, it just sort of popped into my head that some people may be thinking, oh, some of the foods that you guys mentioned, oats and beans and lentils, those take cooking and obviously apples and pears are nice. Is at the time of this recording, they're in season. So I would have like a giant bowl of pears on my counter, and apples are so good this time of year. But, as far as oats, for example, you could make a pot of oats and just keep those in the fridge for a couple days. So it's real easy to just take out and heat up. It's not something you would have to cook every day. Lentils, same thing. You could cook some up. Beans. You could also do a canned version. There are organic canned beans, so easy to keep in your pantry. Just rinse them and add them to salads or even roast. So I really enjoy, if I'm roasting some vegetables, I'll throw in some garbanzo beans or something like that. They're really good that way. So again, just sort of doing a little bit of planning, a little bit of thinking outside the box. These foods can be really easy to incorporate, as easy as just grabbing a pear or an apple.
Yeah, exactly.
Designs for Health offers superior natural products and the most innovative functional lab tests available. Dedicated to designing a well world driven by a higher purpose. The Designs for Health team believes in science-based nutrition and natural medicine, developing health products without compromise, and advancing the way education and technology support wellness for all. At Designs for Health, holistic thinking comes first. Functional medicine becomes conventional medicine. Supplements and lifestyles converge. A wellness epidemic begins.
Okay, so we talked about the fiber, and for the protein, again, we're just gonna, I know, I don't mind that we sound like a broken record, because it's just that we love you guys so much. We're just gonna keep talking about it. The RDA for protein, that's the recommended daily allowance, is, in our opinion, and it seems to be the consensus and the research right now, that it's just too low for optimum health. RDAs are created to prevent deficiency, so not for optimal health. And certainly the RDA for protein is not sufficient for, growing, maintaining muscle. So again, I hope everybody wrote this down already, that 0.7 grams per pound of goal or ideal body weight is a great benchmark for both GLP-1 support and body composition goals.
We've been talking about a lot of practical applications, but Diana, you have created this awesome, simple acronym to help clients, but also all of our listeners, think about sustainable weight loss strategies, whether they're on a medication or not. The acronym is FACT, F-A-C-T, and that's food, activity, consistency, and tracking. You want to talk to us about that a little bit?
Yeah, let's unpack that. I know this is our favorite part, right? The fun nutritionist part. So as Kristen said, F is for food. And it just, we've worked with hundreds of clients. It's just true that most diets fail because they're too restrictive or just too hard to sustain. And we mentioned earlier that consistency is king, right? So the goal is to find an eating pattern or diet that creates a calorie deficit, but still feels doable to you long term. So it needs to be sustainable. We really have come to really like and find super useful that 3-option framework that Dr. Peter Attia has created. And so the 3-option framework is calorie restriction, or CR, that's the first one, dietary restriction, or DR, and time restriction, or TR. Another way to say that is intermittent fasting. And we'll go through those one at a time. So all 3 of those actually can work as long as your adherence is high to those. So you just have to find out which one works best for you. So calorie restriction, CR, it simply means, tracking your calories and intentionally eating fewer calories than you burn. So you could use an app such as MyFitnessPal or another type of program like that. It doesn't necessarily limit what you eat, so there's more flexibility there, but it's how much you eat. So that's calorie restriction, CR. So another one is dietary restriction, or DR. And that focuses more on what you eat rather than the numbers or the calorie counting. So it might mean following a specific eating pattern, such as the Mediterranean diet that we all know about, the paleo diet, low carb diet, etc. And these naturally reduce calories because they cut out certain food groups or types of foods.
So calorie restriction is about quantity. Dietary restriction is about quality or type of food, not eaten or not eaten, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So both can work for weight loss. And the best one is the approach that's more sustainable for the person.
Yeah, perfectly said. Yes.
Okay.
And then there's a time restriction, or TR, and better known as intermittent fasting. And this, I'm sure everybody has heard of this by now. It's all the rage. And basically, this means eating all of your meals within a certain window of time each day. So you may have heard of like a 16-8, which would mean eating all of your meals in an 8-hour window, fasting for 16, or, depending on what works for the person. And this can help lower overall calories without having to count food or eliminate certain foods. So basically, it works because you're shortening that eating window and therefore you eat less. Some people find it easier to manage hunger and energy this way. But again, others like more flexibility. Maybe they have a family eating pattern that they want to eat later or earlier or what have you. So those are the three main dietary patterns.
All right. So we've got all three. It's really about what's finding the best for you. And that's really paying attention to yourself, knowing yourself. And bottom line is that sustainability is what's key for the most part. And we would prefer, or at least suggest with any of these, that you do have more of a whole food based approach centered on the lean proteins and the fiber rich veggies and minimal ultra processed foods, because as we've said before, there's reasons why those are going to support your efforts in addition to choosing one of these types of plants. So that's what we mean when it comes to the F in the FACT plan. So let's talk about A.
Thanks for saying the whole foods approach. What I wanted to say real quick before the A is also it's fine to combine these. So some people, just as an example, some people might feel best on a low carb approach with some time restricted eating. So they might feel best, I'm going to eat low carb and I'm going to try to eat within a 10-hour window, for example. So it's okay to do that too, provided that, again, you can be consistent and that it's sustainable and enjoyable for you. Kristen and I love to have fun. We love parties, all of that. So it's important to say that. Whenever I do a public speaking talk, I like to start with that. I'm like, I know we're going to talk a lot about health and nutrition, but I do like to have fun. And if anyone's having a party, I'll love to come because I do like parties. Okay. So the A stands for activity. And we've talked about this earlier. Exercise helps maintain weight loss and regulate hunger hormones. That we haven't talked about yet. Is that amazing? So I'm going to say that again. Exercise helps maintain weight loss and regulates hunger hormones. So those people that are moderate exercisers, actually, I saw this amazing study. Those people eat less than sedentary people because exercise has that hunger regulatory mechanism, which is so amazing. And then we know that the people that are most successful with keeping weight off after they lose it are those that consistently exercise. So really incredible. Strength training, again, is non-negotiable because we love you guys, for preserving muscle and metabolic health. And additional exercise like cardio, as we discussed earlier, is also super helpful.
So the C in our FACT acronym is consistency. Like we said, we don't have to be perfect, but we do need to be consistent. And most experts will say about 80% adherence over time can be enough for success. However, I just want to add something here, and it's something I've seen in practice. And Diana, you may or may not see the same thing, but I'd be interested in what you do see. I find that for people that have difficulty losing weight or they're not getting the results they want, the 80-20 rule just isn't quite enough. They need to be a little more consistent to actually get the results and get them sustainable. And I see this really, especially in my perimenopause, menopause women. For whatever reason, men seem to have a little more flexibility here. I don't know why. It's not fair.
I hear that story. If I had like $1 for every time I heard, well, it worked for my husband, but it didn't. So anyway, sorry.
I know. Life isn't fair. We just have to kind of maybe accept that. I don't know. But I really don't find 80-20 working well for most of my female clients, especially if they're having to try something, a little more unusual for weight loss than just watching what they eat for a few days. So it's one you might have to experiment with. I don't think there is a hard and fast number, but if you find you're not getting there, try to be more consistent all 7 days of the week rather than taking weekends off. And then I think the goal here is to avoid getting on the weight loss roller coaster, because sometimes with that 80-20 rule, we have this great week. We might see the scale shift a pound or two. And then on the weekend, we say, okay, I can be a little bit cheating over the weekend. And then by Monday, you've gained half of that back or all of it back, and you're starting again, and you're on this back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And that's really hard on your metabolism. We want to avoid that if at all possible. So I do think maybe more consistency than you want to have is important, but give yourself a timeline. Like, tell yourself that you're going to follow a plan for 90 days and know that that's where you're going to put all of your effort, and then see where you're at. Maybe go for a little bit with a little less consistency, try to maintain what you've lost or where you're at before you go and maybe push it a little bit harder again. So I don't know. I like to do things kind of in waves, not see something as like, okay, for a whole year, you're going to follow this and never have a little bit of a break or a little bit of a cheat anywhere. But I do think it's something to be mindful of, because I think it sneaks up on people and we get really frustrated that it's not working.
Yes, I 100% agree with everything that you said. And again, just to hammer home the point that consistency is king, just as Kristen was saying. So for most people, it doesn't work to be on your best behavior Monday through Friday and then off the rails on the weekend. Like, can you, even if you have to go to 90% consistency, can you keep that, all 7 days? And again, diet breaks are great. There are holidays, there are things like that, but that consistency is king, and that sustainability. So with the framework that we outlined, choose the one that's most sustainable for you. If you're not a calorie counter, don't choose that. Or if you experiment with it and it doesn't work for you, then maybe try one of the other two. So there is something that will work for everyone. But again, some people have to be a little bit more consistent, and that's those of us that are, perimenopausal, postmenopausal time. So I agree with you, and you just want to find what works for you. And there will be something that works for you. Promise. Okay, so the final T is for tracking, and whether that's journaling meals, stepping on the scale regularly, that data builds awareness, and awareness drives progress. Studies are clear that most successful dieters do track their weight regularly and track their food, at least at the beginning, so you can understand what serving sizes look like. It's a little shocking. Start experimenting with that. And you can Google foods that you regularly, most people I find, when I look at their diet journals, when we start working together, they eat generally the same types of things day in, day out. Most people have a pretty consistent eating pattern. If you kind of Google the foods that you eat mostly and look at the calories, the macros, or track on one of the apps out there, or work with a nutritionist, that's our preferred method, to help you create a personalized nutrition plan, that's a great option too. You can't change what you don't measure. It's that awareness and accountability that can really move the needle. And Kristen, I want to ask you a question if you've seen this. So when I'm working with a new client, I will ask them to fill out a diet journal at the beginning of our time together so that I can So before we meet, I can kind of wrap my brain around what they're doing and already start kind of coming up with suggestions based on their goals. But I have heard so many times from people that they've never done that before. And the mere act of journaling their food intake, they learned, they're like, I already learned so many things about just writing down what I food, like how it makes me feel when how I'm overdoing this or underdoing that. So have you seen that with your clients?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I really hone in on this. I do teach a class at one of the nutrition schools, and one of the skills that I teach is how to do a food journal with a client and how to assess that. And I really bring this point home because it's tracking the food can be miraculously helpful at people understanding exactly what they're actually eating every day, because it's very easy to go to the pantry or the refrigerator or this vending machine or whatever, and you don't even realize what you're doing. And so there's an accountability just with that. But I will tell you, I kind of find the magic not just in the foods that are being recorded, but I also have them record why they were eating
Oh, me
and
too.
how they felt about it, like more of an emotional piece about it. And so many people will finally have this like light bulb go off, like, oh my gosh, half the time I'm eating and snacking because I'm trying to avoid something I don't want to do, or I'm procrastinating, but I'm not actually hungry. So it really helps people get in touch with their hunger signals. And to me, that's huge, because you don't want to just feel like you're restricting things. You want to understand why you eat and what it's all about, and nourish yourself appropriately and not use food to compensate for issues that you need to deal with. And so I think it brings a lot of things to light, and it can be really wonderful to help move somebody down the road.
Oh, that's so true. I do the same thing. I ask them what time they're eating, and then I ask them if they're hungry. That lots of light bulbs go off around that. Are you hungry? Why are you eating? Where are you? Are you in your car? Are you in your pantry? No shame. But where are you? I've known to be in my pantry nibbling on something.
Yeah. But you know what? That is so important, because, and that's something we really didn't touch on here, but especially with these weight loss medications, because of how they work, digestion is really, really important. And with the slow gastric emptying that happens, if we aren't fully digesting our food, it's not only sitting around longer, but it's fermenting and causing problems. And so when you're not sitting down and paying attention to your food, you skip all of the digestive enzymes that you need to actually break that food down, and it makes the situation worse. So just that concept of mindful eating and not eating on the run, not eating in the car, but really paying attention to your food. So your brain and your body are in that digest mode versus the activity mode. That's a really important piece that can help people be more successful when using these medications. So that's another thought there.
Yeah, I love that. Kristen, tell me what your take is on the long-term outlook for these medications. Do you think they'll remain as mainstream as they are now? What are you thinking?
Well, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, but given, I will just say, given the pharmaceutical industry and where the dollar is going right now with medications, I think they're just going to continue to evolve. But there may be some other beneficial reasons for them to evolve other than profit for pharmaceutical companies. I think there's some good applications for weight, diabetes, overall health. I think we're going to see things keep evolving there. They're going to become more accessible. We're already seeing, like, I don't know about you, but I have seen more TV commercials, social media, things promoting the weight loss medications than ever. You can't turn on the TV without seeing a commercial for it. So I think we're going to have more people feeling pressure, societal pressure to use them, maybe even for cosmetic reasons and not for health reasons. We need to be careful about this. That could come at a cost. So I don't think it's going away. I think we need to be aware of why we may want to choose experimenting with these. I think we're going to see the expansion of microdosing of these medications. Right now, the doses are quite large and very what I would call supraphysiologic, not the amounts that our body would make. And like you said earlier, like a single injection, the effects will last for a full week versus natural production just lasting for a few minutes after we eat a meal. So I think the microdosing, where we're using smaller amounts, is going to continue to evolve. There were people compounding those microdoses. That's become an issue, and it's in flux right now as to whether or not that's accessible, but I think that's going to come to fruition. And so there may be different applications. I think we need to stay on top of what's happening and the science that comes with it, and maybe be a little cautious because we don't have long-term studies on some of these different off-label uses for these medications, and just be aware and know yourself and know whether it's right for you. We mentioned a lot of potential complications earlier in the show. And if you're somebody that is susceptible to gallbladder issues or pancreas issues or GI issues in general or other kidney problems, there may be reasons why they're not a great choice for you. I don't think it's a one size fits all. I think we have to really look at the individual and know if it's a proper fit. The other thing I just get concerned about is culturally maybe a shift to going back to prioritizing being thin over being healthy. And that really bothers me. I think about my daughter and all the social pressure. For a while, we were swinging away from that and more body diversity acceptance. There's always TikTok and Instagram that's showing, girls that, thin is the way to be. But this, I think, is compounding that and creating a social thing, cultural thing that we might want to be really careful about. So using these for a relatively small amount of weight loss may not be, I don't know, in my opinion, the best thing, but maybe there'll be applications in the future that make it better. As long as we're thinking about the muscle mass and metabolism and health as the underlying piece of it versus the aesthetics, then there may be a place there. What do you think?
Oh, I think you just gave me goosebumps. That was so eloquent. I think that should be on TikTok. I've never put it on TikTok. I don't even know how to do that. I was going to say I put your little rant on TikTok, but I totally agree. I also, our youngest daughter is still in college, and she sees these drugs on college campuses in use by healthy weight young women. And I don't know where they're getting them. I don't even want to think about that. But it's because, as you said, there is this trend back toward being very thin and not taking into consideration health. So that is very concerning to me as a woman, as a mother. Certainly think they have their place for those in which case it's medically indicated, but I am concerned. The thing I feel very optimistic about is the role that people like us, that nutritionists, can play in this culture, this time in our culture, because I see there's so much room for us now. I think it's actually increasing the need for nutrition professionals, honestly. And so I
Right.
just feel so optimistic about that. And a couple of things that come to mind. So we can help clients use these tools responsibly and educate them on things their physician may not educate them on, which is just what we talked about, the importance of strength training, maintaining muscle during rapid weight loss, the proper foods to eat, that sort of thing. Help them transition safely off of the medications in collaboration with their physician, of course, but I have had clients that have transitioned off the drug because not everybody wants to stay on the drug forever. And that's my understanding of how they're used at this point, is that you need to stay on it forever to maintain that weight loss. And then when you go off the drug, I've just seen it anecdotally with clients, they regain the weight they lost and more quite rapidly, but they weren't educated on how to come off the drug and incorporate and eat healthy foods and exercise appropriately and that sort of thing. So there's a huge need for nutrition professionals in that regard. And then also what we've just been talking about recently, like exploring natural ways for sustained weight loss with the protein, the fiber, ways to mimic GLP-1s naturally, appropriate exercise, all of that. So I'm just very optimistic on how much nutrition professionals can help people. So for the nutrition professionals listening, please know that you are needed even more than ever right now. And for the general population that's listening, if you're wanting a natural weight loss strategy, reach out for help. As you see, there's so much we can do to help you naturally.
Right. You hit so many things that are important. I want to just come back to that issue of being on them for life. And I want our audience to just think about if you're on a medication that's causing you to eat significantly less than what your body would usually intake to maintain. And let's say it's 1,000 calories a day, not 500, whatever, but it's definitely lower than what you usually would take in. Remember that your body needs micronutrients to survive. It needs micronutrients from food and macronutrients to function, for your enzymes, for your energy production. If we're shorting ourselves that for years on end, one concern I have is about what happens 10, 20 years from now to how other parts of your body may or may not be able to sustain because you're not getting the nutrition that you need, not even getting the basic RDA for basic nutrients. So that is a concern to me. So I hope that as a society, we'll think about there are longer implications that we may not be aware of yet, and find ways to work with someone to manage those things so that you don't put yourself at risk just because somebody didn't tell you now it might be a risk. So be thinking about that.
Yeah, I love it. I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead. There's this one. Okay, sorry to interrupt. I'm so glad that you brought that up because I've seen clients who are eating let's just say not a nutrient dense diet. So they're eating a diet that is not nutrient dense. Then they go on one of the GLP-1 drugs and they eat just less of that diet that's not nutrient dense. And that seems to be a fairly consistent pattern among people that aren't educated around these medications. And then, so I just wanted to bring that up because that's to your point of then, my goodness, that's not you're eating low nutrient density and then you just eat less of that. And you're right. So what is happening to your body? So that was my little rant. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's going to be things that we don't know about yet that come to pass. It doesn't mean we can't do this in a healthy way.
Yes.
I think we just have to be thoughtful about it.
Yes.
And getting back to health doesn't come easy. There's not an easy button to be healthy. Like you have to work at it. You have to think about it. And you can't just try to sustain on what our society is pushing for easy calories. It's just not going to work that way. So it comes down to when are you going to commit? Are you going to commit now and put into place the habits that help you do this in a consistent and healthy way? Or are you going to cheat and get to the result that you think you want now, but then end up having to commit later because now you've got other health conditions that have manifested because of it and because you've put it off? It's about committing to your health one way or another and not just looking for the easy fix. Prescription medications like to offer an easy fix. And yes, you can get easy results, but it doesn't mean it's a fix. So I think we just need to care about ourselves enough and commit to ourselves to do what we need to do to truly nourish ourselves in whichever path we choose to get to our goals. So that's where I'm at. We're not anti-medicine, but we are pro-health creation. And I think that's one of the biggest points we wanted to bring out today.
Another goosebumper. So good. That was such a powerful way to wrap up. And thanks for being my favorite co-host ever. Thanks. That was a lot of fun.
Just so many thoughts, and we don't really get the chance to just talk about things. Sometimes we interview some great guests, but sometimes it's nice to just take a big topic and break it up. So thanks for doing that with me today. It's been great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you everyone out there for listening. As always, we truly, truly appreciate your time. If you found this to be helpful, please share the word, like, subscribe, send it to, at least one friend, one family member, because we know this message is really, really important right now. And until next time, stay nourished, stay curious, and keep doing the good work, everyone. Take care.
For more information, go to designsforhealth.com. Don't miss a beat. Find other episodes and subscribe to this podcast on YouTube or check us out on your favorite streaming app. Now available on Apple Podcasts, Pandora, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and more. You can also visit nanp.org for more information. Looking for a board-certified holistic nutrition professional to support you on your health journey? Go to nanp.org to get started today. Membership in the NANP provides you with a competitive advantage. Whether you're a current practitioner or a student, we want you to become an active, informed leader of the holistic nutrition community and join our association today. When you're ready to go a step further, you can boost your credibility by becoming board certified in holistic nutrition. Visit nanp.org today to apply. The information on the NANP podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical or legal advice. The NANP is not liable or responsible for any harm, damage, or illness arising from the use of the information contained herein. By listening to the information on this podcast, you agree to defend, indemnify, and hold harmless the NANP and all agents. Copyright NANP, all rights reserved. Until next time, stay nourished,